power sector is in the news. A Reserve Bank of India report says it makes Indian state governments run into unsustainable debt. They mean the debt of discoms. The Prime Minister last month urged the states to not resort to what he called ravedies or freebies. And he mentioned that some discoms owe over 1 lakh crore rupees to power generating companies. So how serious is the debt of discoms? Is it getting unsustainable? Joining me are Sabyasachi Majumdar, the Senior Vice President and Group Head at ICRA Ratings, and Rahul Prithyani, the Senior Director, Energy, Sustainability and Commodities at CRISIL. Rahul and Sabyasachi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sabyasachi, if I might begin with you. We get all the up-to-date data of power overdues in the Prapti website. Are you getting a sense that some of the states are reaching unsustainable levels of debt?
So basically, there's a great correlation between what is the gap between what the discom earns by way of tariff revenue and tariffs and revenue and subsidy, and what they're expending by way of cash, way of total payments, including power purchase creditors. So if we see some of the states which have very large amounts, the total amount of debt as estimated by Power Finance Corporation is 2020 report was around close to 5 lakh crores, out of which about 4,10,000 crores was from the external system, about 75 to 80,000 crore rupees was from the state government themselves. Now, in the next couple of, in 2020, 21 and 21, 22, it will be safe to assume that the state, the total system, the gap has been 60 to 80,000 crore, anywhere between 60 to 80,000 crore per annum. Now, some of those, gaps would have been met by, delaying payment to the power creditors, as you're pointing out, and they might have received some grant or support from the state governments. But it will be fair to assume that a very large amount, perhaps 50,000 crore rupees or so per annum, would have been borrowed from the banking system. So the external indebtedness of all the discoms put together would safely be somewhere around 5 lakh crore plus as on date. Now, some of the states which are extremely...
One minute, Sabyasachi, this 5 lakh crore, some of them are dues from discoms which are clearing, even with a lag, isn't it? So for the banking system, 5 lakh crore is not the problem, correct? The problem amount may be much lower.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have the data on how much of that is NPA or overdue for payment, but the overall, amount is 5 lakh crore rupees.
Yes.
Now the thing is, if the states were, cash neutral or cash positive, that is whatever they were earning by way of revenues and subsidies was greater than what they were paying out by way of, then of course you're right that 5 lakh crore is not an issue. But if there is still a gap which could be anywhere between 60 to 70,000 crore, then there's a problem because you have to borrow to meet that gap. So that debt level actually never comes down.
Okay,
so
fair point. Okay, Sabyasachi, let me get the other guest also into the conversation. Rahul, what is your sense about what is unsustainable debt? The Prapti website says that at the start of July, the overdue, that is even after giving 45 days grace period, it's not paid, that is 1 lakh crore, 1.05 lakh crore. 14,000 crore was paid in July, but the current balance overdue end of July is 1 lakh 14,000 crore. Now, do you think this is a crisis level?
So, Lata, if you look at various examples of the past, I think we've been going through all the restructuring schemes as well as the various packages that have been due towards discoms over the years. So, very difficult to define a crisis. You could say it has been a perpetual crisis, actually. On an ongoing basis, we frequently keep having the same set of issues. And in the last year, because of the input cost moving up, I think the picture has got, slightly more in the last few months with the input cost moving up. Probably, the situation has gotten a little bit more acute. But given that, there are plans with respect to, again, supporting the sector with various schemes, and RDSS is also on the way. So maybe, things will kind of, work out. But the fundamental issue of operational discipline and kind of, doing those regular tariff increases, reducing of AT&C losses, I think those issues continue to remain on the table, because what has really transpired is some of the earlier schemes have gone, maybe not done adequately to kind of, improve the operational performance. And that is where, the challenge remains. And given the importance of the sector, the government will continue to kind of, play an important role from the central government level. But at the state level, I think the story continues to be slightly, challenged.
Okay. No, that of course the numbers are speaking it out. By the way, I mean there was a confusion that I need to resolve. This RDDS, revamped distribution sector scheme, actually started in the previous budget, not in the 22 budget, in the 21 budget, and the rules were put out on the Power Ministry website by July of 2021. So what we heard from the Prime Minister and the ministers last week is more a reiteration. It's not a new reform scheme. It is a continuation of the 2021 scheme. It is a 5-year scheme starting in 21 and supposed to end in 24-25. Now, Sabyasachi, have you monitored the performance state-wise? Are you seeing, I mean, we know that the atrocious performers in terms of high debt are Andhra. Overdues are 10,826 crore, J&K another 10,000 crore, Telangana 19,000 crore, almost 20,000, and Tamil Nadu 25,500 crore. Those are the big states. Do you see any improvement in any of these with 1 year of the RDDS scheme?
These RDDS projects have just got approvals and all.
Oh.
So it will be some time before the actual implementation will take place, and we'll see the results in terms of reduced AT&C losses and things like that. So the process is just started. And to add to the point that you have mentioned, we monitor two things. One is the absolute debt levels, and also what is the gap between what they earn and what they spend. So if you look at in absolute debt terms, some of the states which have very large overdues also have very large levels of debt. For example, Tamil Nadu has an overall debt of about 110,000 crore. Of course, this is an integrated utility which has some generation asset also. But even if we make allowance for that, their overall debt levels are fairly high. Then we have states like Rajasthan and UP, which have each around about 45 to 50,000 crore rupees of debt. Then Andhra Pradesh has about 27,000 crores. Telangana has 22,000 crores. This is, of course, 2020, they would have only added to the debt since then.
Yes.
And if you're looking in terms of the gap between what they earn and what they spend, some of the states which are very high gap level continue to have very high gap level. Someone like Tamil Nadu, where the gap is more than 2 rupees. Then you have states like Rajasthan, Telangana, where the gap is more than 1 rupee, and several other states like West Bengal, UP, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, they would have gaps of somewhere around 50 paisa or so.
Okay. Yeah, I take your point that there are these outsized, defaulters. And in Tamil Nadu in particular, the Reserve Bank of India's State Finances report pointed out that if 75% of the debt is assumed by the state government and equity infused, then the total increase in fiscal deficit will be 5.2% of the state GSDP. And, they already have, I think, 3.8% fiscal deficit, to which you add this 5.2, you're staring at a Tamil Nadu fiscal deficit of nearly 9%. So power is quite clearly a big issue. But I still want to get to know whether, and after all, you guys at CRISIL and ICRA are more interested in who will default, right? So, Rahul, we saw a large number of power companies absolutely go out of business because of delayed power construction and lack of money coming in. Do you think any independent power company is in danger because of these receivables? The Prapti website says 55% of this overdues of 1.05 lakh crore is owed to IPPs, independent power producers.
So, Lata, as far as the utilities are, as far as the power generators are concerned, I think clearly this is a impending problem, and that has been there for some time. And very often, it's in most cases, it is almost a 6 months and 6 months plus. I think to some extent for the newer players, at least they have factored it in their business plans in terms of, overdue payments. Okay. But at the same time, wherever there are stresses, and there are enough and more projects in the thermal stage which have been, under stress over the years, and given that backdrop, I think the challenges are there here to see. lot of them have also moved over the years to a mixed model where some of the sales are happening in the merchant market, where at least this year, in the early part of this year, this fiscal year rather, the realizations have been relatively better. So I would say, there are going to be people who are there at the margin where the financial wherewithal is not very strong in general. So there will be some stretches. But by and large, most of the players of late at least have started factoring it in their own business plans. And that's how they have kind of, progressed over the years. But I would say it is not very, very unusual compared to what we have seen in the past.
Okay. Yeah, certainly not of the last 5-6 years. But, my whole point is I'm not able to understand why there is so much of noise suddenly on this, state debt and power discom issue. 1.05 lakh crore is a large overdue amount, but neither for the banking system nor for independent power companies is it likely to create defaults. And after all, they are servicing it. So, Sabyasachi, I mean, is the situation dire in any case?
So obviously, the thing is, every time a scheme comes, it works for a few years, then again the state power sector gets into a liquidity trap. So already, we are seeing that the total debt which is there is more than 5 lakh crores. So if you remember, when Uday was implemented, the total debt was about 4 lakh crores. And in spite of a substantial takeover of all this debt by the state governments, we still see that now the total debt is more than 5 lakh crores and we have more than 1 lakh crores by way of
overdue debt.
Power purchase overdue. So if you see again in 4-5 years back, we are back to the same position. So it's not a very pretty picture. Okay.
No,
but yes, you are right.
I'll tell you what I'm driving at. Sabyasachi and Rajiv, if you all can give me, and Rahul, is any entity in danger of running into default status and they will not get any more money from the states, from banks, be it discoms or IPPs? Are you seeing default status anywhere, Rahul? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So as far as I mentioned, Lata, we are not seeing a situation where things are very, very different compared to what we have seen in the past.
Okay.
As far as availability of funding to the discom segment is concerned, I think it will generally be part of some of the government plans and the programs that are there, because incremental funding easily being available from the financial system will be a challenge for the discom, given the kind of position that they are in. So the government intervention in some shape or form will be very, very important and very, very critical. As far as the IPPs are concerned, I think there will be a problem at the margin. As I said, for maybe some weaker players, on the margin, there could be some challenges, but as I said, it is not something very unusual compared to what we have seen in the past.
Okay, I know it's not unusual, but I'm only asking whether it is worse than what it was 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Sabyasachi, anyone in danger of?
If you look at the overall generating space, we can divide it into two sections. Obviously, the biggest one is thermal power and the other is the renewable segment. The renewable segment, in the renewable segment, we are seeing that by and large, barring a couple of states, the payments are fairly timely. I mean, there are a couple of states which are delaying on wind. There are a couple of states which are delaying on solar for various reasons, which are not necessarily linked to the discom finances. But by and large, we have seen very few defaults in RE, maybe very small, less than 5% of all the entities would have seen any kind of significant liquidity issues. Okay. Now, in the thermal segment, the issues do not pertain just to the payment issue. Now, in many of the thermal power projects, the issues that they faced was that there was a very substantial time and cost overrun, which they have not entirely been able to pass through because they had fixed price or competitively bid based tariffs.
That's right.
Secondly, many of them actually have not been able to tie up the entire PPA.
Yes.
So typically some of these projects would have, PPAs only to cover 30 to 40% of the sales, and the rest of them would be sold in the merchant market as and when there is a demand. And if you're looking at, thermal power project typically requires at least about 65 or 70% of the PPAs to be tied up on a long-term basis.
Got it.
Very sustainable, DSCRs.
Okay.
So the issue is not, I mean, the issues of defaults are there in the thermal segment in the private sector, not so much in the CPSU segment,
Okay.
where the payments are protected by the tripartite mechanism. But for
Okay.
private sector
Got that.
IPPs, they are facing liquidity issues. But some of these, default issues are not necessarily just because of receivables, but because of other issues like incomplete PPAs
Got
and
that.
inability to
Got
source
that.
coal.
Out of time, Sabyasachi. Thank you very much, Sabyasachi and Rahul, for giving us your views on the power sector. It is a huge ballooning overdue situation and debt situation for DISCOMs, but we must not confuse it, as our experts say, with the power companies that went under in the last 6 years. That was more because of construction problems and PPAs not in place. We conclude in this discussion with just one word on the rupee. It's a sterling performer today with a dollar costing only 78.70. July 19th, it was 80 rupees to a dollar, and in just 12 trading days, it's come down to 78.72. Rupee is the only currency today in the Asian basket which is higher, which is appreciated. Other currencies are slightly under pressure, but for us, both crude and the dollar index is working in favor of the rupee. With that, we wrap up on this edition of Bazaar. Trading ideas lined up for you on Chartbusters.